A 21-year-old dude from Indiana catfished a teenage girl by pretending to be a millionaire from Kansas and promised to give her $9 million in exchange for slaying someone in Alaska and sending pictures and videos of the scene. Any sane person would know that was sketchy, but of course this chick was all like, 9 million? Cool. The teen then rallied 4 of her friends and they got to work. But once the deed was done, she realized what she was mixed up in and things started to unravel. Speaking of mixed, today I'll be making mixed berry turnovers. On June 2nd, 2019, 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman left home to go hang out with friends. After she had been out for a few hours without contacting anyone, her dad, Timothy, started to get concerned. He initially thought she went to the movies or the mall or something, but she wasn't answering any of his phone calls, so he had the feeling something bad may have happened. Timothy then texted Cynthia's best friend, Angela, asking if she knew where his daughter was, and let her know that he was concerned for her safety. In their text, Angela told Timothy that she dropped Cynthia off at a nearby park right before she vanished. She was really devastated about the whole thing, and told her dad's friend, "I hope she comes home safely. She's my best friend." And sometime in their message thread, Angela said, "I know she will come home safe." The reason Timothy was freaking out, other than the fact that he was an overprotective parent, was because Cynthia had a developmental disability that caused her to function at a 7th grade level. Because of her condition, Timothy knew Cynthia was more vulnerable than most 19-year-olds. And once 11:30 p.m. rolled around, Timothy called the police to report his daughter missing. Officers told him he had to wait 24 hours to report her as missing, but that didn't cut it for him, so he started searching for Cynthia himself. Timothy ripped his motorcycle through the town looking for his daughter. He put out search parties, scoured nearby wooded areas, and contacted a bunch of people, but all of his efforts failed. Cynthia was still missing. 12 hours after Timothy first called the cops, he contacted them again and they started a search for the missing teen. Officers talked to a few people who were close to Cynthia to see if they could find any clues that may lead to her discovery. Cynthia's BFF, Angela, told the cops that she and Cynthia were smoking the devil's lettuce with her other friend, Caden, who was a homeless 16-year-old. Homeless at 16? That's pretty rough. But after 2 days of searching, there was a knock at Timothy's door. He opened the door, saw the police, and from the look on their face, he knew that was it. Cynthia had been found, but she was lifeless. That morning, detectives were out searching for Cynthia by the Eklutna River. When they made it to a creek near the Thunderbird Falls hiking trail on the outskirts of Anchorage, they found Cynthia lifeless on the ground. Her hands and feet were bound with duct tape, and there was a strip of tape covering her mouth as well. After finding a bullet wound on her body, officials concluded that that was the cause of her passing. And just 2 days later, detectives identified their perp, Angela, who, much to Timothy's surprise, was actually named Denali Brehmer. Since Angela, who we'll now call Denali, was the last person Cynthia was with, she was one of the first people to be questioned by the police. And when she got to talking, detectives had no idea what they were in for. Complete shookery. So Denali told investigators that she went to Thunderbird Falls with Cynthia and their other friend Caden. But somewhere along the way, Denali said Caden pulled out a firearm and knocked Cynthia out with a bullet. Detectives just had a feeling that Denali was lying. Investigators obtained a search warrant to look through Denali's phone, and that's when the truth started to surface. On Denali's phone, officials found a bunch of disturbing photos of a minor being tormented. With that frightening discovery, detectives got a second warrant to look through Denali's text messages and social media pages. In doing so, they found a bunch of awful photos and videos of Cynthia before, during, and after she was slain. They were sent to someone in Denali's contact list named Babe, who referred to her as Angel. And let me just tell you, this girl was far from an angel. In the conversation thread between Denali and her babe, she went over her detailed plans to physically violate a teenage girl and record it for him. As officials searched deeper in the message thread, they found out that Denali's babe was the one who assigned her to commit and record the crime in exchange for a large sum of money. $9 million to be exact. $9 million? That's a lot of money, and it would definitely be a motivator to commit a crime as horrific as what Denali did to Cynthia. Once Denali's messages were thoroughly searched through, here's what officials determined. Someone who was claiming to be a dude named Tyler from Kansas met Denali on the internet and gave her the assignment of the century. He convinced her he was a millionaire and said he would pay her $9 million in exchange for violating and slaying someone in Alaska. Denali, who was clearly hungry for money, was all like, yes, man on the internet who claims to be rich, I will absolutely execute someone in Alaska for you. But she didn't want to do it alone. Instead, Denali got 4 friends on board to help her carry out the crime for a cut of the money. Officials theorized that the group met sometime in May or June and discussed how the whole shebang would go down and how much money each person would get for their part in the crime. It is believed that Cynthia was an easy victim for Denali because of her disability and the fact that they were BFFs. In a later interview, Timothy said his daughter was so excited to have friends and just loved hanging out with them. So based on that bit of information, it's safe to assume that Denali wouldn't have much trouble convincing Cynthia to hang out that day. But before Denali's big performance, she told her babe, Tyler, that she was gonna go buy some good green so she could get Cynthia high before going after her to prevent her from fighting back. Can we just take a moment to address how awful of a friend Denali is? Like, I get she wants this money from Tyler, but why wouldn't she go for a stranger instead? I just can't believe she had the guts to do something so terrible to her friend. So on the day of the incident, Denali's sidekick, Caden, borrowed a car from his 19-year-old friend, Caleb. Caden and Denali told Caleb that they'd give him $500,000, and after hearing that number, Caleb was probably all like, sweet, here's the keys, have fun. And once Caden secured the whip, he went to pick up Cynthia and Denali. Both friends made Cynthia believe they were all just gonna go on a hike, but as soon as they got to the Thunderbird Falls Trail, they strayed from the path and headed for a more secluded area along the river. Somewhere along the way, Denali and Caden stopped and somehow convinced Cynthia that it would be a great idea to duct tape each other and take pictures. Cynthia went with it at first, but once the tape was around her wrists and ankles and over her mouth, she started to freak out. Man, all of these crimes are really ruining duct tape for me. Denali and Caden then took the duct tape off, and Cynthia started yelling at them, saying she was going to call the police and report them for abducting her. At that point, the demented duo knew there was no going back. Caden reached for the 9mm Glock that Denali had and fired the bullet in the back of Cynthia's head. In Caden's interview with detectives, he claimed he blacked out, but he said he did remember pulling the trigger and pushing Cynthia in the river. Denali, on the other hand, first told officials that she had no idea Caden was going to grab the Glock and pull the trigger. Throughout the process, Denali was sending pictures and videos to Tyler on Snapchat. She then posted a super sketchy video on her Snapchat where she said, "I'm sorry everybody, my family, my friends, I guess you will hear from me when you hear from me, but I won't be back for a long time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it." After Denali and Caden finished the job up, they decided to text Cynthia's family and tell them that they had just dropped Cynthia off at a park in Anchorage. After that, they put up the front that they had no idea what Cynthia was up to or who she was with. Okay, but then why would Denali post her confession for all of Snapchat to see? And how did Cynthia's family not find out about it? This is getting messy. Well, I guess Denali and Caden really did want to keep it under wraps, because after everything was said and done, they burned the weapon and Cynthia's belongings. But after Denali sent all of the gruesome content to Tyler and that Venmo hadn't hit yet, she started to doubt their agreement. Later in the conversation, Tyler told Denali that he wished he had never made a deal with her in the first place. He claimed they would meet up, but told Denali the moment he saw a cop, he'd rat her out for committing the crime. And right around then is when Denali found out that she was being catfished. After doing some digging, it was discovered that Tyler from Kansas was actually a 21-year-old guy named Darren Schillmiller from Indiana. Turns out, he was using some random dude's picture to lure Denali in, and I'm sure you've already guessed it, but he wasn't a millionaire. Once the cops found Denali's Snapchat confession, they brought her in for another round of questioning. At that point, Denali knew the jig was up and told the cops about the whole setup. She said Darren offered her money for slaying her bestie and even told them that she was also instructed to physically assault 2 minors, one who was 8 or 9 years old and another who was 15. FBI agents found proof that Denali sent Darren photos of the 15-year-old she went after, but there are no records of the younger victim Darren assigned his teenage hit woman to go after. In the end, Denali and Caden and Caleb were indicted alongside 2 other teens who remain unnamed due to their age. That's insane. These were just kids running around doing whatever was needed for some dollar bills. Darren, the mastermind, was also charged for the crime after he admitted to telling Denali to slay her bestie. In this interview with officials, he said that he had been planning the event for 3 weeks with his new Alaskan hit woman. All 6 defendants had been charged with the crime in the first degree and took the plea not guilty. We're still waiting for the final decision to be made for the 6 perps, but they're all facing very hefty sentences that sit right around 99 years in prison. While it's clear Denali did all of this for the money, there is still so much mystery about how she was able to do something so horrific to someone who was so close to her. Cynthia's dad described his daughter as super trusting and loyal. After Timothy found out the truth of what happened to Cynthia, he was livid. Yeah, I am too. In a press interview, Timothy said that if someone was playing a game with Cynthia, she would believe the game until it went too far. That day, he believed Cynthia thought it was a game and didn't realize the truth until it was too late. Ugh, that is so sad. Poor girl thought she was going on a fun hike with friends, and then boom, a bullet. I think Denali takes the cake for the worst friend ever. Timothy also posted a really sad and strange poem titled Nightmare in My Head, where he summed up what happened to his daughter and kept rhyming the word head over and over again. Which, like, is it technically a rhyme if you're using the same word? Either way, I'm not gonna tell Timothy how to mourn something so tragic. If rhyming on Facebook is your way to cope, then like, hey, so be it. You know, I can't get over how many disturbing elements there are to this story. Not only was Denali on board with the plot to slay her bestie, but she was also able to get 4 other people to help her, and she recorded some of it on Snapchat. On top of that, what does Darren have to do with any of this? Why was this random Indiana man so set on getting Denali to do such terrible things to Cynthia? How did she get so very mixed up? As badly as I want the answers to those questions, I may never get them. So instead, I'm just gonna do what I do best and eat some sweets. Who's hungry for turnovers?